Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Mike here at Game from Scratch, and today we've got a tutorial for Godot. I figure I haven't done anything Godot related for quite a while, so let's jump in and do something. And what I thought I was going to cover was 2D particles, but then I went down a rabbit hole. So instead, what we're getting is kind of a generalized 2D. We're going to look at particles and we're going to look at lighting, because what I did is I thought to myself, you know what? Let's do a real-world example of why you would use particles in a game like Godot. We're talking 2D specifically today, and I thought, well, wait a minute. What about a torch? A torch makes a lot of sense. So that's what I did. I actually created a torch. You can see this guy over here, kind of a pixelated look, if that's the effect you're going for. That is a particle system driven torch. And then I thought to myself, well, let's try and get a slightly more realistic version of it. So that's what we've got over here on the right. And then in the middle, we've got a water fountain because, hey, it ain't just about torches. But then I went one step further and thought, you know what? A torch is a genuinely useful thing. Let's actually make one. So we've made a actual torch that you can then embed and use in a game. And then I went one step further and I thought, you know what? Let's have some dynamic lighting around the torch like you would actually use it in a real world game. So that is how we ended up with this example. It is just an instance of the torch we are going to create. That torch is going to be created using 2D particles in the Godot game engine. We're going to bring all the things together, 2D lighting, etc. And this is the end result. And if you go ahead and play this, now, one thing to be aware of, there's actually a bug in Godot. If you've got multiple monitors, I'm running this on 4K. My other display is 1080p. So when you go full screen, this is what you get. So that's what you'd be aware of. But here is the example we are going to make. So you can move the torch around and you can see how it's going to light up your scene. We can also change the intensity of the torch, like so. And like so. And we're going to look at all of these things. Now, this is one way of implementing a torch. And to be honest, it's probably a relatively poor way because you can only have one torch in the scene. And as you saw, we clip off scene. There are some failings in the way that this works, but they're easy to work around. And this is probably one of the easiest ways to create a torch for your character. And if you're working in it so you have just one single character, this is probably a good approach to you. So we're going to cover a heck of a lot in this tutorial. So without further ado, let us jump in. Now let me shut that down, and I'm going to move this guy off screen, and we're going to make a new project. So I will be right back. Okay, so here we are. We are using Godot 3.2.3 stable at this point in time. Just go ahead and create a new project. That means, of course, it is going in my temp folder because, of course, it is. All right, so C:/temp. We'll call this torch YouTube. All right. Double meaning there, but oh well. So create a folder there. We're going to create this one using OpenGL ES3. It should, in theory, work with ES2. There's also a lot of changes coming to the way that particle systems work in Godot 4. I look forward to them. Right now, there are some limitations of what you can do with particle systems. For example, there's no physics interaction with the scene, which is a little bit unfortunate. And we're not going to cover all aspects of this. There's just so much we could potentially cover. But first off, let's just take a look at particle systems in general. You want to go ahead and create a particle system. We're, again, dealing with 2D in this particular case. We're going to come up here, and we're going to create a particle. So you'll see here you got two options. They're both inherited from Node 2D. There is the CPU particle 2D and straight up particle 2D. Now this is obviously CPU based. This one should take advantage of the GPU when it can. So we'll go ahead and create that one. Now you're going to notice we have a requirement on our particle system right away. The material to process the particles is not assigned. So we're going to have to go ahead and create that right away. So we're going to create here material, create a new, and there's two options here. You can create a shader. There's a particle type under shaders. We're not going to cover that today, but I'll show you how to convert in a minute. Or we create a new particle material. That's what we're going to go ahead and do. And here it is. And we're actually going to go ahead, we're going to probably reuse this guy. So we're going to go ahead and save that, and we'll call this torch part material. All right, so there is our guy. We can come back to it anytime right here. And this is where you start defining your particles. Now, a particle is a stream of stuff. In this case, it's a material that we're defining right here. And you use this for, again, doing things like water or spell effects or, in our case, torches. And there's a bunch of stuff configured. Back here at the particle system itself, we've got one really important one right here. And that is the number of particles to be part of this system. So just go ahead and create that. We'll move this down so we're a little off center. And there you see. We have our particles just streaming away. And there's a bunch of things that will control this. And we'll take a look at those right now. So first off, we've got this direction. This one is shooting straight down. Now, what we want to do is actually shoot up. So we're going to switch that. From that, we want to go Y. And the reason why it's actually shooting down isn't because of this direction here. It's actually gravity that's causing that. So what we're going to be doing is actually turning off gravity, because gravity has very little effect on flame. So we've got it now. The direction of our particle system is this way, negative Y, obviously in the negative Y axis. So that we got that going on now. So now what we need to do is actually make the particles, speed. So that will do it with the initial velocity of the particles, and we'll start that off at, say, 50. And there you're going to see we've got a nice spread of particles going up. Probably want to go a little bit higher than that. So let's go ahead and make that 70. All right, so there you see now, one of the things you may not like here is, in the case of a torch, we have a whole lot of spread going on right there. And that's actually controlled over here in direction under spread. Let's make that more like 8% spread or 8 degrees of spread. And now you can see we are much more torchy in our approach. Looking good so far. So that is kind of how you set up a particle system. There's all kinds of things you can control. You can control the orbital velocity. So you can have it spin on like that. You can see if you're trying to create a circular particle system, orbital velocity may be your guy. Linear acceleration, you can have it so that it speeds up as it goes out or so on. So this will be the amount that it speeds up. Any one of these things have curves attached to it, so you can control it over time. And we've got dampening. This is how much the falls off as it goes on, so you can increase dampening. And you're going to see the results kind of tapering it in. It's kind of like dampening down the fire hose is one way you can think of it. Again, that can be controlled by a curve as well. Angle, scale, color, and so on. It's color that we're going to use quite heavily here. Now I'm going to want to actually go back up to our particle system here, and we're going to jack the amount of particles up quite a bit. Let's go with a nice, even, interesting number like 4, 4, and 4. All right, there we go. We have a decent number of particles. Things are looking pretty solid, pretty much what we want to do. So now let's take a look and turn it a little bit more torch-like. Now, the first thing we're going to probably notice is that our torch, it doesn't really look right in this particular case. So let's go ahead. We'll bring in some of the assets we need. So I'll pull those from the other example. Now, this is just stuff that I created in Paint. Really ugly job. So let's open these assets up here. So open in our file manager. And let's bring some of the assets that I already created over. All right, so we're going to need the background eventually. We're going to need my torch graphic. We're going to have this graphic here and this one here. I'll explain what those are for later, but let's bring those 4 in. All right, so now they're available. Let them import in here. And first things first, let's go ahead and create our torch. So let's just drop that graphic in. It's way too big. So let's actually just grab that guy. I don't know why I drew it so big, but we can fix that easy enough. So let's bring that down to about a quarter size, like so. All right, so there is our torch that everything is going to come out of. Now, you may notice this looks more like a fire hose than it does a torch. Well, that's easily fixed. So what we're going to actually do is switch out the emission shape. Now, right now, you can see they're all coming out from a single point, and that's set right here. We're going to do is set that instead to a sphere. And now you see it's gotten a little bit more broad, but let's just double the radius of our sphere, and we're looking pretty much close to full coverage of the top of our torch to 2.5. There we go. So we've got a much better look going on right there. We are getting there for sure. Next thing you're going to probably want to do is have this look a little bit more like, I don't know, flame. And that's sort of definitely one of those things that's missing. So this is, again, another thing that we set. And we're going to set this one by the color. And as you can see, color is straightforward. This is the color of our particles coming out, but we're not going to do a single cover. Instead, what we're going to do is a color ramp. This is a new gradient, and we may reuse this guy. So again, let's just go ahead. We'll save that guy, and we'll call it torch gradient, like so. All right, there you go. So now we have a gradient set to control this guy, and we can control this guy right here, open it up, and here you can see the gradient in action. Let's go ahead and create the new gradient that goes with it, and let's edit that gradient. All right, so here you can see we've got a couple of different colors here. We can click in here and make a new color. So let's do the starting color, double click that guy, and we're gonna go from orange, like a burnt orange color, and then here we're gonna double select that guy. We're gonna go to a red, and then at the top, we're going to filter off to smoke, and we've got white. All right, so here we go. We can move these guys around, by the way, so that you can have it in a different range. But that is one way to go ahead and make. So we're going to want a little bit more smoke. So let's do that, and let's drop that guy in there, bring that out. All right, so there you go. So we got a nice bit of smoke coming at the end here. Let's just drag you over here. There. So there is our colors for our torch. May not be specifically what you like. For one thing, we've got a very particle-y look going on here. And what you're going to probably want to do to change that is apply a material or a texture. So this is right now just using a little cube that's being drawn here, but we can actually go ahead and bring in a textured image that is used for the particles. And that's what I'm going to use this guy right here for. So we're just going to basically drop that guy in right here. Now, the problem is that image is way too big. So each of the particles is a little bit large at this point in time, and that can be handled with scale. So let's scale this guy down, 0.2, and we're getting much closer. So we'll actually go a little bit smaller, 0.15. There you go. So we have a torch kind of giving off a look as we go on. Not too bad so far. So what's next? Well, let's tweak our dampening slightly. So again, we probably don't want this torch to look like a constant flamethrower. We want it to slow down a little bit. So go here to dampening, and let's set that up to, I don't know, 2. 2 should probably be about right. And then we're going to randomize that a little bit so it doesn't look so completely uniform. So let's put 0.3 randomization in, and then we probably don't want our particles to be so consistent in size. So we got here already, we're scaling things down. We can randomize the scale just a little bit. So let's randomize this to 0.2. There you can see a pretty big, profound change there. So until you get to the effect you like, I'll go 0.1. Let's see what that does. No, it was better at 0.2. And some of this is definitely going to be just playing around until you get something you like. Now, the truth of the matter is, I actually like the textureless version a little bit better, except for, of course, you don't want to jack that scale down quite so much. So here, let's do 1.5 scale, and let's do 0.4 maybe. Okay, that's all right. I actually like the one I created the other time better. But a lot of this really is going to boil down to what you do with it, how you make it work. You kind of tweak things around. You can also actually vary the hue out if you so wish. So you can see here, we can just drag that guy and you'll see immediately the effect there. Now, in this case, it isn't actually something that we want to do. And you can also vary it out here, the amount of randomness in the, so if you've got a bunch of variation going on, so let's say here we go there, and we can just jack that guy up quite a bit. And there you can see a multicolor kind of rainbow thing going on. Now, again, probably not something that you actually want to do in this particular case. Just be aware that you're actually capable of doing so. And yeah, I think I'll go with this as our thing. Probably the only thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to slow it down a little bit. The initial velocity is probably a little bit too high. So there we go. So there is our torch that we're going to go with from this particular case. If you want it to last longer, by the way, you could do so. Basically, that is how long it lasts. So the longer that it runs, the more the particles will be spread over time. Of course, if you want to burst your particles, you could set it as a one-shot. And then you come up here and you can basically do a restart. And that will spit. It should have spit them all out to match accordingly. So the length, the duration, or the life cycle of your particles will be controlled up here. So basically, the longer that value is, the more particles will be created over time. Again, okay, why did you get turned off? If you want to have even more particles, easily just keep jacking that up. You'll end up with more precision as a result. If you want to, you can have things like explosiveness, and that's causing them to go poof. Now, another thing that you may want is when you first start this guy. So let me just start that guy over again. You can notice they all kind of come out, and torches don't go poof up. So what you may want to also do is pre-cook them a bit. And that's what pre-process is. Basically, you could say, all right, run this thing for, I don't know, probably 2 seconds would be enough. That means the minute you turn on the particle system, it's got 2 seconds as if it's simulated. So see how we don't have that poof when we first started it? So here, boom, poof. Let's cook in 2 seconds worth of particle processing and no poof. Now, another thing that you may want to do is generate the visibility rect. This will run the particle system for 2 seconds and then figure out the boundaries of where the particles will be and apply them for you. Okay, so there is our particle system. There is our torch. Maybe a little bit on the extreme side still, but it'll work for us. So, I'm just going to, again, velocity down just slightly. So initial velocity, let's turn that down to 50. All right, let's turn that down to 40. Yeah, that'll work. And we'll put a little bit of randomness in the velocity so that they're not all running at a consistent speed. All right, there we go. So there is my torch. I am happy with it. We've tweaked the heck out of it. You can, again, use particle systems to create just about anything you want along these lines. Now what we've done, we've created this guy. Now let's go ahead and look at the lighting options. So we're going to just go here. We're going to add a new child node here, and we're going to make a light. Now a light, we'll go ahead and create a light 2D. And you can see here, we've got a warning. A texture with the shape of the light must be applied to the texture property. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in this image right here. Now, this is just kind of a gradient circle, white on the inside, black on the out. And this is going to work because we're going to set things up as a mask. So let's drop that in as the texture. And then boom, it is now available right there. Now, I'm going to want to go ahead and move these guys. So let's center these guys around the axis so that everything actually makes sense. So let's bring you right there. And then our light setup anchored around. So there is the shadow it's going to cast. Now, one of the things you're going to want to figure out is your scale. And since I'm doing this, what I'm going to be setting this thing as is a mask. So go there. And now what that's doing is when we use it in the scene, where the white is, that will be shown. Where the black is, it will be basically not lit at all. So now we've got a particle system we can use in the world. Let's go ahead and save that. We'll call this guy torch. And now let's go ahead and create a new level. So scene, new scene. We'll create a 2D scene here. And we're just going to want to go ahead and set a background for it. So here is our screen that we're going to work with. Let's drop a background in here. All right, so that's just an image I downloaded off the interwebs, and we're just going to go ahead and we'll resize that down, and we'll move it accordingly. All right, so there is our level in place. Now I'm going to come back up here. We'll instance a child scene, and we'll create one of our torches. So there you can see the effect that masking has on in the background. So what I'm going to want to do is go back here, and we'll set that scale up a little bit higher. So we'll set that to 4. Save that, go back over here, and then you're going to see the results. So you want to do is have the torch, the mask, kind of be big enough that it fills everything around it. We can even kind of make that even bigger. So we come back here, back to our torch, and we'll set that to 5 instead. All right, I didn't save that. Head on back over here. So now you see, as we move around in the scene, the mask covers it. And you can keep making that. Realistically, you make that as big as you want. There's no real consequence to it. It's just basically the amount of scaling and the amount of blackness that comes out of this as a result. And we'll head back over here, and there you go. So now we've got a torch in the world that we can move around and look at accordingly. So we'll call this, let's just save our scene as, and we'll call this the level. And we'll go ahead and run that, and we'll select level. And there you go. So you can see we have an animated torch in our world. Awesome. Okay, so there is the one thing we can do right now. So we don't have any real variation on the torch. It's pretty static. So let's make it so that we can actually move that guy around. In order to do this, we're going to have to set up a couple of things here. Project settings. We're just going to go ahead and do an input map on this guy. Let's minimize all these built-ins. All right. So we're going to add left arrow. And that's obviously going to be left arrow. Okay. Right arrow. Up arrow. And obviously you could mask buttons and joypad. Oops, did not mean to do that. And finally, down arrow. And we'll add that in. And finally, let's map a key to that and down. All right, so now we're going to use left and right to move it around our scene, and then we're going to use up and down to control the intensity of it. We're going to show you how to do all of that in but a second. So first things first, let's add a flicker to this guy. We'll show you how to do that next. So we've got this guy in place. Let's actually name you something that makes sense. So we've got torch, and let's just move it slightly. So let's move him down in the scene like there. All right, so we've got somewhat centered to the screen. There is our torch. Save that. Let's go back to our torch over here, and let's go ahead and showcase a way to cause it so that the amount of light being off is a bit of a flicker. Now you can do that by changing out this texture over time. You could animate that texture value, but all we're going to do is animate the scale of it. You could also do it with the energy, but you're going to notice if I change the energy, look at what happens to this the torch body. So you may not want it to give off too much more light. So let's stick energy back to normal. But what we are going to do, let's come up here. We're going to go ahead and add an animation player like so. All right, so now we can animate things in the scene. We're going to go ahead and create a new one. So new animation, we'll call this flicker, 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 flicker. All right, so now we're going to go ahead, select our torch. We'll add a track. So we can do it automatically over here. And anything that can be animated as long as it's got a little key beside it. So actually, it's not the torch I want. It's particles I want. And what we're going to do is find that scale. Where did you go? Okay, maybe I am in the wrong thing. I want to go back to the, oh, sorry, I want to go to the light. All right, so this is what we want to do. We want to animate this, the texture scale. All right, so there we go. Create. So there is our texture scale. We'll make this a 2-minute long animation. At this point, it should be set to 8. So let's do a midpoint right here. We'll add a key. And at that point, we'll make it 8.8. And then we'll add a key here, and we'll put it back to 8. Small change in radius of our, yeah, okay, so there we go. And you could do easing. You could actually obviously do a transition between them. You could switch this into a curve if you so wished or whatever. There it is. We'll set this to automatically play on load. And now let's save that. Unfortunately, you can't see this directly in the editor. So if we go back here to the level, you're not going to see the results of that animation. But if I go ahead and do a play, we should. There you see. So you see a small strobe effect. Let me just make that a lot more profound. Okay, so what I did is I jacked it way up to 12. This is going to look ridiculous, but you're going to see the effect immediately. So there you go. So you got a pulsating, flickering torch. Oh, I don't have it on loop. So you got to see it pulse once. All right, so let's go on back here. Let us loop that animation, and let's try that again. All right, so we've got our torch in scene. You see this, the amount of size is going up and down and up and down. So you can easily have a flicker effect around your torch. You could also have it get a little bit smaller, which would probably make it look probably even more realistic on the whole. But there is a way you could animate the masking effect of this particular torch. So now let's go ahead and add some translations to it. So we're just going to attach a script to this torch. Let's just cancel that. Let's give this guy a good name. All right, so let's go ahead. I guess that is now a bad name. All right, so go here, we'll attach a script to it, type GD script. All right, we're good to go. All right, so now we're just going to do some input handling. So func input event. All right, there we go. So now we're going to check. We're basically going to do some movement on each particular thing. So if we do, say, if event dot is action, let's just move it for now. Left and right arrow. So left arrow. Now we're going to want to actually move our sprite. So this is just going to be. How'd you end up there? Get back here. All right, there you go. All right. So here we're just going to do a move local X. So left arrow, we're going to move by a -10. And if event.is action right arrow, like so, and done, move local X 10. All right, so there we go. We're going to move left or right. What did I screw up here? Nothing. All right, so let's go ahead and run that. Left arrow, we can move the torch this way, and you'll notice we have that strobing and animation effect, and this way, strobing and animation effect, and done. All right, so we've got a flickering torch of doom. Now we're going to go ahead and handle the up and down. One of the things we're going to want to do, so right now we have an animation that's controlling if it's going up or down. We're basically going to just stop that if we press the up or down arrow. So we're going to go if event.is action up arrow. So this will increase the light radius for this one. So we'll go. What do I want to do here? So I guess I want to get my animation player. Animation player dot is playing. Animation player dot stop that. All right, there we go. So if the animation player is playing, we'll stop playing the animation. And now what we're going to do is, I guess we should check. We don't want to get too big in the size of the amount that will scale that thing up. So we're going to go here. If light 2D dot texture scale is greater than, let's see, what I'm going bigger here. I'm always going to do this backwards. I swear I'm going to do this backwards. So if it's okay, so I don't want to get any, so less than, let's say 13. All right, we'll make sure that that works. Then we're just going to go ahead and light 2D dot texture scale equals, and then we're going to do some joyous copying pastes, plus equals 0.2. So we're just going to grow this in size. I'm going to find out, I know I flipped this around the wrong way. So, oops, I did way too little copy and paste. All right, so there is, let's just do up. Make sure we've got this going. Method fail, error, parse error, unexpected method. All right, what's your issue here? Oh. 1 second. Oh, I'm making up operators. All right, let's get rid of you. Save that. All right, we should be good to go. Hopefully that parse error is gone. We'll go ahead and run this. And there we go. So now if you press the up arrow, it's going to stop scaling, and then we can see we can increase the light out to a maximum of 13. Now we could probably make it if we really wanted to make this big. Okay, we can go there. And now let's do the exact same thing, but in reverse. I don't know, did I get that last line? All right, here we go. So this is going to be down arrow. All right. So animation player is playing. So stop it if that's the case, as long as it's, say, greater than 1. All right, we'll let this get really small. And in this case, we're getting smaller each time. So go ahead, we'll run this. And now we've got a down arrow control. And here you can see we can make it really tiny. Now, obviously, there is the issue with this approach. So you're not going to want to let it get smaller than that amount right there. And if you want to get the inner radius even smaller, you're going to have to basically take this guy right here when you're drawing it, and you're going to want to make sure that that inner spot is smaller and smaller and smaller. So you probably want to get smaller than, I don't know, what is that, about 4 maybe? Let's check that out. 4. Yeah, that'll work. All right, so there you see, we can expand it out, we can shrink it down, and we can move it around. So there is a way of having a dynamic torch in a scene, sort of. Again, this isn't the best approach in some ways. It's one of the easiest and one of the most performant approaches you're going to get. But what you're not getting here is the ability to have multiple torches because of the mask burst. So this approach that I'm showing you right here would only really work for like the main character holding a torch. But truth of the matter is, in a lot of games, that's realistically all you actually need to support. As a lot of times, the dynamicism is the lighting is centered around the character. So that's the approach you want to take. You can easily do so. Got this nice particle effect in the middle, and we are solid. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of other things, and that's about it. Now, the first one is in terms of the lighting. So go back here to our scene. One of the things you may find yourself wanting to do is have things that can't be lit. So let's say for some reason this guy's head right here, we didn't want that to be lit. Well, what you're going to use in that case is something called a light occluder. So we're going to come in here, basically select it, and I have problems using this tool all the time because what I want to do is basically paint there. We'll create the polygon light, come on, and start drawing. All right, so what's going to happen is light can't go here. So let's say this guy was some magical dead zone, and we'll just draw a frame around it. So you see no light is getting in, and we'll go back and play. And you will now see as I move the light around the scene, it's not working in this case. Why are you not working? 1 second. Oh, it doesn't seem to have taken, even though I've drawn the polygon. All right, so come up here, occluder polygon. I don't know if I'm getting into a bit of a bug here. So it is now there. Okay, it's gone. I don't know what just happened there because. All right, so let's see if that's actually blocking the light. It's hard to tell, so zoomed out. Okay, a few more things I had to set up here. I have to set up so that it actually casts shadows. What I did is I turned shadows on. This is on the light source of the torch itself. Now, the effect here is going to be hideous because we don't actually have anything obstructing in the scene, but this is blocking the light of the torch. So you're going to see the effect here. So what I've done, I've turned shadows on. I've set the color up to a mostly black color with about 60%, 70% transparency going on. I set the gradient length up. I filtered it a couple of times. You're going to play with these values to get something that you actually like. Now go ahead and run that, and you're going to see as we move the torch around in our scene, all looking good. But when we get to something, remember I set an obstruction layer around this guy that gets in the way of our light. We can also see a little bit of the effect right now. You can have it. There you go. So there you see the light is being blocked by that shape. And you can really control how much to affect this. So for example, I could come in here and I could set this up to full opacity, straight out black. And it's going to be pretty harsh, to be honest. So let's go ahead. We'll set that in there. And there you can see a very sharp effect of that lighting from hitting that occluder. And you see, so your torch isn't being made past that. So if you had like a wall in the way or something, you could use these light occluders to make it so that that light doesn't get past them. Now you're going to probably want to play with it so that it isn't such a sharp edge, etc. And you're probably going to want to match it so that it's a pure black like in the background. But here you can see the effect. You kind of got a gradient for tapering off the amount of the light that's being blocked. So that is another aspect of creating a torch in your scene to have slightly realistic lighting effects. All right, so that is most of what I want to cover here. The one last thing that I'm going to go to is basically back to the particle systems. Now I said when we set this guy up, there are a couple of options for how you could create this guy. So you could have created it as a particle shader, we created it as a particle material, but we also could have created it as a shader material. And we can actually go ahead and switch this over. So now we're using a shader material instead. This automatically switched it over. So we'll go to the edit mode. There is our shader. And here you can see you can actually set up shaders for this is what is controlling our particle systems here. So if you want to have a lot of fine-tuned control over your particles, you'll notice that if we go to the very top of this shader, it is a shader of type particles, and you have control over the vertex output. You have no control over the pixel output, by the way, just the vertex. So that is what you're implementing here. But you can use this if you want to do some really fine-tuned control. You can do so by switching in here and going into the Godot shader language and really doing fine-tuned control over your particle systems in action here. But that is way beyond the scope of what I want to cover here. Instead, we looked at quite a bit today here. So we got this nice little dynamic torch in the scene. Again, there are some definite flaws with this approach because you could only have one in the scene in this particular case. So this approach would only realistically work if you're dealing with a single character's torch, and otherwise the occlusion mask approach that I'm taking here, it won't actually work for you. So instead, what you want to do is go back to this version, and you're going to design your art in a different way. You basically start with blackness and then add light to it. In that case, what you're doing is you're going to your light here, and instead of doing it on a mask, you'll do it on an additive basis. And what this does is basically this light then is being added onto your scene. Now, it's not going to look right here because we're not really set up for it. So that's the downside. So you're going to have to, you can still see the shadow effect. You're seeing the fall off of the lighting effect there. So you're going to have to design your scene basically with darkness in mind. So what I've done here is taken a typical graphic look and reversed it. So I've got a fully lit scene and I made it dark. But you could go the opposite approach and have it so that what happens with your 2D lights is you're adding light to the scene, not taking it away. And that would then instead involve, where do we go? Back here. Setting this to additive mode instead of masking mode. So that's just a completely different approach. You're going to flip things on your head. And if you're going to do that, what you probably want to do is actually invert this guy so that it's dark in the middle and white on the outside. And then again, you're trying to configure it so that your scene has light added to it as opposed to masking, where I'm essentially taking the light away from the scene. And this is the approach you would take if you want to have say textures in your scene. Sorry, you have these torches just placed in your level. So say you had a torch here, and a torch here, and a torch here, a torch here, as opposed to a torch that moves with the character. In that case, you're going to want to take the additive approach to adding light to your scene. So anyways, we covered quite a bit there, a little bit rambly, a little bit freeform, but hopefully that was of some interest to you. That is basically an introduction to 2D particles and 2D lighting occlusion in the Godot game engine. Let me know what you thought of this, and I will talk to you all later. Goodbye.